Hello, class. My name is Dylan Moore, and today I'll be going over my topic, which is outlaw biker counterculture in the 1960s and 70s. My initial interest in this topic came from listening to Sonny Barger's autobiography, Hell's Angel, The Life and Times of Sonny Barger and the Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club, and realizing how the bikers viewed themselves, not as out of control criminals, but as seeking freedom from a system that continued to shackle them. This created a desire to see if their claims of only seeking freedom and being similar to the often romanticized hippies was valid or not. Outlaw Motorcycle Club was a term initially used to describe a motorcycle club not affiliated with the American Motorcycle Association, or the AMA. However, outlaw motorcycle clubs would begin to become noticeably more violent and engage in criminal activities such as drug trafficking and murder beginning in the 1960s. Motorcyclists were often portrayed in popular media around the time, such as Easy Rider and The Wild One, as either freedom craving drifters or rebels chafing at a suffocating system. This created a persona that resonated with the lower class youth of the 60s and 70s. As far as the outlaw motorcycle clubs themselves, most people are probably familiar with one of the most famous outlaw biker clubs, the Hells Angels. However, the Banditos, Pagans, and Mongols also emerged in this era, along with many more. This was truly a golden age for outlaw motorcycle clubs. Many members of these clubs contained or were even founded by Vietnam veterans that had returned from the war and were struggling to come to terms with what happened in Vietnam. My research questions were as follows. Biker outlaw gangs are often seen as the antithesis of hippies, but were they actually a mirror of hippie counterculture? What led clubs to shift from an interest group to gang activity? And was there a correlation between Vietnam War veterans joining and founding motorcycle clubs and the violent tendencies that began to emerge in the clubs in the 60s and 70s? A large part of my research focused on the background that members of the outlaw biker clubs came from, and how this background contributed to the desire to join the organization. I also analyzed how the background of similar movements like the hippie movement were alike and different, and what this revealed about the emergence of both movements. I looked at what impact the war may have had on the violent element that became prevalent in the clubs during this period. As I previously stated, many of the outlaw club members were veterans of the Korean War or the Vietnam War. In fact, the Banditos were founded by Vietnam vets. For my sources, I used a combination of autobiographical work and secondary sources that analyzed the sociological reasons that people were joining outlaw clubs in the 60s and 70s. My primary sources include the previously mentioned Sonny Barger autobiography. Sonny Barger was the president of the Hells Angels from 1958 to 1998 and a major catalyst to their transition to an outlaw motorcycle club. I also used Hunter S. Thompson's Hells Angels and A Strange and Terrible Saga. Hunter S. Thompson traveled with the Hells Angels for roughly 1 year in the 60s and wrote about his experiences, which incidentally ended with him being stomped out by the Hells Angels due to speaking out about a member assaulting his wife. An important secondary source I used was William Delaney's thesis, Over the Edge and Into the Abyss, the communication of organizational identity in an outlaw motorcycle gang. Delaney includes insight regarding soldiers returning from war and how the transition to outlaw motorcycle club first occurred. The book, The American Counterculture, A History of Hippies and Cultural Dissident by Damon Bach, proved to be an invaluable asset as well. This book gave me insight into the development of hippie counterculture and what was the driving force in the creation of the movement and their membership. What I discovered from my research is that outlaw biker clubs and hippies both had feelings of stagnation and resented the lack of control they had in society and in their own lives. Both groups also considered the pursuit of freedom as a driving force in their movements, while displaying anti establishment tendencies that could be violent and nonviolent. As far as the correlation between the Vietnam War and outlaw biker clubs, many of the members that were veterans in the biker gangs were often suffering from undiagnosed PTSD and used the motorcycles and the clubs to achieve a relief from these wars. While the shift from interest clubs to outlaw motorcycle clubs was a result of the same issue plaguing much of the 60s and 70s, exhaustion with the status quo and a lack of any decision making authority.